It was late October when my girlfriend Stacy and I decided to take a much-needed getaway from the rush of our lives. Both of us had been working non-stop for months, barely finding time to catch our breath, let alone spend any quality time together. So when we stumbled across a cozy cabin listed on Glamping Hub, tucked away in the hills of Stowe, Vermont, it seemed like the perfect place to unwind. The ad boasted of picturesque views, complete privacy, and proximity to the village. But more than anything, it was the promise of the fall foliage that pulled us in. Vibrant reds, oranges, and yellows painting the hillsides as far as the eye could see. It sounded magical. The trip there was uneventful. A 4-hour drive from our apartment in Boston, winding through highways that slowly turned into scenic roads lined with trees, their leaves gently swaying in the wind. The air grew cooler as we got closer to Vermont, that distinct smell of autumn filling the car earthy, crisp, with a faint hint of burning wood from distant chimneys. The sort of smell that always reminded me of being a kid, running through piles of leaves and feeling the bite of the cold on my face. Stacy seemed content, her fingers running through her chestnut hair, occasionally glancing at the map on her phone to make sure we were still on course. We arrived at the cabin just as the sun began to set, casting an amber glow over the hillside. The cabin sat atop a gentle slope, its rustic charm pulling us in. It had that quintessential log cabin look, with a stone chimney puffing out thin streams of smoke and a porch that wrapped around the side, overlooking the valley below. It was smaller than we imagined, but cozy. Charming even. The outside world seemed to drift away as soon as we stepped out of the car. The cabin's lock system was one of those new code entry types, the host having sent me the combination a day earlier. As I punched in the code, Stacy leaned in and whispered, "This is going to be fun, right?" Of course, I replied, grinning at her as the door clicked open. Just the two of us, a cozy cabin, no distractions. But the moment we stepped inside, something felt off. At first glance, the cabin was everything we expected: quaint, rustic, filled with that old country charm. Everything was made of wood, the floors, the walls, the ceiling beams. There was a subtle but distinct scent of pine and aged wood, mixed with something else, something unfamiliar. It wasn't unpleasant, just unusual, like the remnants of a fireplace long since burned out, or perhaps the dampness of wood left in the rain. The living room was small but cozy, with a stone fireplace taking up one wall. A worn leather couch faced it, with a coffee table strewn with magazines that looked several years old. There was a modest kitchen with all the basics: a stove, a refrigerator, a few cabinets, and a small round table with 2 chairs. Off to the side was a narrow hallway that led to the bedrooms. There were 3 in total, but when we arrived, one of the doors was locked. Stacy noticed it right away. "Why would they lock a bedroom?" she asked, frowning slightly. "It's not like anyone else is staying here." I shrugged. "Probably personal stuff. The owners probably keep their things in there when they rent it out." Stacy nodded, but I could tell it unsettled her a little. She was the cautious type, always wanting things to be just right. "As long as we have enough space," she said, forcing a smile. We unpacked, deciding to leave most of our bags in the second bedroom and keep the master bedroom neat. After all, we'd be leaving in just a couple of days, and it felt silly to clutter the place when it was just the 2 of us. That night, we ventured into town for dinner. Stowe's village was everything we expected: charming, quiet, the kind of place that felt untouched by time. The streets were lined with twinkling lights, and small shops sold handmade trinkets, local maple syrup, and knitted scarves. We found a small restaurant and had dinner, talking about nothing in particular, just enjoying the peace that came with being away from the grind. For the first time in months, we both felt like we could breathe. After dinner, we wandered around the village for a bit before heading back to the cabin. By the time we returned, it was late, the stars bright against the inky sky. The air had grown colder, biting at our exposed skin as we hurried inside. We watched a movie, cozying up on the couch with a blanket wrapped around us, the sound of the wind occasionally howling outside. It was peaceful, just the kind of quiet we'd been looking for. Little did we know it wouldn't last. The next morning, a chill hung in the air. Outside, the sky was an overcast gray, the kind that promised rain but never delivered. We decided to explore the trails near the cabin. The woods were serene, the only sounds being the crunch of leaves beneath our boots and the occasional rustle of wind through the branches. Stacy seemed more relaxed than she had in months, her face softening as she took in the beauty of the nature around us. But despite the peacefulness of the surroundings, I couldn't shake this odd feeling. It was like we were being watched, though every time I looked around, there was nothing there, just trees stretching up toward the sky, their branches clawing at the air. After a few hours of hiking, we returned to the cabin, our legs tired but our spirits high. Stacy went to take a shower while I sat down on the couch, flipping through the channels on the TV, trying to find something to watch. That's when I heard it. At first it was faint, like the distant hum of a radio, but it was coming from inside the cabin. I stood up, listening more intently. The sound was coming from behind the locked door. I pressed my ear to the door, trying to make out what it was. It wasn't music, not exactly. It was more like talking. Muffled, indistinct, like someone having a conversation just out of earshot. My heart raced a little as I stepped back from the door. I knocked on it lightly, but there was no response. Stacy stepped out of the bathroom a few moments later, towel wrapped around her. "Everything okay?" she asked, noticing the look on my face. Yeah, just thought I heard something I said, trying to play it off." She raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "I don't know, probably just the wind or something." But I knew it wasn't the wind. I could still hear it, that faint hum, like a radio playing in the background. Stacy didn't press the issue, and I didn't want to freak her out. I told myself it was nothing, just some old device left in the room that had turned on by itself. Still, I sent a message to the host, letting them know what I heard. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. "Sorry about that. Not sure why the door is locked, maybe my wife left something in there. As for the noise, it's probably just an old radio we left behind. I can swing by and unlock it for you later if it's bothering you." I thanked him and told him it wasn't a big deal. I didn't want to make a fuss, but something about it was gnawing at me. Why would there be a radio left on in a locked room? And why lock the door in the first place? The host's explanation didn't sit right with me, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was exactly as he said, a forgotten device and nothing more. Stacy and I spent the rest of the day exploring more of Stowe. We had lunch at a quaint little restaurant on Main Street called Harrison's, where the food was surprisingly good. After that, we drove around the area, taking in more of the fall scenery, the trees ablaze with color. For a while, the weirdness of the locked room slipped to the back of my mind. But it never went away completely. When we returned to the cabin that evening, the host had left a message for me. He said his wife confirmed there shouldn't be anything in that room, and that he was still happy to come by and check it out. I told him to go ahead and come over. If there was nothing there, at least it would put our minds at ease. But as we waited for him, the unease grew. Stacy was lying on the couch, flipping through a book, while I found myself drawn back to the door. That faint sound was still there, but now it was a little clearer, like whoever or whatever was on the other side had turned up the volume. I pressed my ear to the door again, listening intently. This time I could make out words, though they were jumbled and hard to follow, like someone tuning in and out of a radio station.